And I see that's probably going to be a little hard to read, that red color with the light. So who could benefit from CCO? Honestly, everybody could, to be honest. I was just fine with our traditional agency 10 years ago. There was nothing wrong with the agency that we were getting services from. It was just an option I thought I'd try. And we slowly worked over. First, we just did a few hours where my mom was the provider. Now we've been full in for many years. But the benefits, people that have family and friends who they'd like to hire as employees. Those who may live in rural settings that don't have access to a lot of the agencies. Members who want to create their own schedule. So again, they have that control. And also they have control over how much they can pay their employees. Now, when I say that, I should put an asterisk because it's within a certain amount. Like, you can't just say, I'm going to pay them $50 an hour, because that is not kind of a going rate. That's above what the unit rate would be. So you have a certain dollar amount that we're given, and that's where the ISB will come into play. This was one of my favorite quotes. This is a parent of an adult daughter with Down syndrome. And I'm not sure if it came across on, yep, it did, great. So Julie, I took her on her daughter a year and a half ago. Her daughter had had a stroke and had been put in a 24-hour setting, and she wanted her to come back home. And in order to do that, she decided I'm going to go the CCO route, and I'm going to hire. She had a sister, a niece, and I think she's hired 2 more just friends at this point. So I think they have 4 employees currently. But she said, right here, it took her a few years for someone to convince her to be able to do this. The case manager explained the process, made a few recommendations as who her key player, she referred to me as her key player. CCO has simply given her that personal empowerment with more success in 20 months than an agency did in 10 years. So that just gave her and her daughter just more control over everything. Julie and her daughter, you consistently use services each month all the way through the pandemic. So we have key players, as Julie referred to, with CCO. First, you have your case manager. We were talking earlier about the MCOs. Iowa Total Care and AmeriGroup are 2 MCOs in the state of Iowa, but then we also have the fee-for-service HIP members, where they would have the, could be DHS or Child Serve, or, my mind's gonna go blank right now with listing some of the other case management places across the state. But your first point of contact with this would be the case manager. They have to meet with you face-to-face, if I remember correctly, quarterly. And at least annually, you have an annual meeting, just like you would as an IEP in school. So your annual meeting, they are required to give you the options that are available to you for all your services. CCO is one of the options and should have been on their list for the last 12 years. If this has not been mentioned to you, they're not doing what they're supposed to do per their contract with the state of Iowa. And that is a big problem. That should be reported to, you should just straight out say to the case manager, I know you haven't been doing your job because I haven't heard of CCO from you yet. And I feel like CCO is going to work for me. Whether their personal opinion is, we don't like CCO because maybe it's a little bit more work for them in the computer, I don't know. Some just prefer traditional agencies because their friends are the executive director or whatever. Everybody has an opinion. But I have heard that some just don't want to do it because it's a new way and they're used to the old school ways of stuff. So
when you're saying case manager, okay, is that a case manager through an MCO or through DHS?
Both.
You don't have one through DHS?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. If your case management is through DHS, if you're on the HIP program.
On which program?
HIP program.
Never heard of it.
Okay, so that means that you probably don't qualify for it if you've never heard of it.
I have no idea
Okay.
what that is.
Okay, if you haven't heard of it, then it is what? The HIP program is a program that is where the cost efficiency of your private insurance. So if you have private medical insurance, okay, so that's why you wouldn't qualify for it. So if you have private medical insurance through like a parent's workplace, and the private medical insurance is cost efficient to the state for them to reimburse you to pay for that private insurance, you are considered a HIP member. So my instance, my husband works for Fairway. Fairway is very, I'll be honest, their insurance is great. They're very reasonable rates. We're on HIP. We don't get the full insurance amount that our whole family pays, but we get this portion that my son Bryson would qualify for. So what we pay for him, 1/5 of the family members. So they have found that it's more beneficial and cost effective for the state for us to continue having him on private insurance to pay the majority before Medicaid picks up the rest. So, or we could just do away and not have him on private insurance and he is only on Medicaid. And I know I'm talking a lot of terminology because I see confused faces. HIP? Oh my gosh. Thank you. Because you're going to throw it right at me and then I'm not going to know. You're an insurance guy, aren't you? So, and we've been on it for years, but yeah, the terminology, I can rattle off the acronyms, but. Yep, there are certain things that you have to meet certain qualifications. And that's where your case manager also comes into play. Your case manager should be knowledgeable about this and say to you, because they know if you have private insurance, they know those different things. They should be mentioning to you, hey, do you think you maybe qualify for HIP? Hey, we could get you this paperwork to fill out and submit. If you qualify for HIP, you would not have a case manager through the MCOs. You would have a case manager through DHS, Child Serve, one of the other places that's not an MCO. Where my son's is through Child Serve. You are through an MCO because you do not qualify for HIP. Okay.
So we have really good insurance too, but my son just got put on Iowa Total Care. I don't know why, because our insurance through my husband is so good.
You have to qualify, yes. You have to apply and qualify for it. And then annually, you have to update your paperwork, and it's like a reapplication every year. So you could be kicked off after a year and then have to go back to Iowa Total Care. But so far, we've been lucky. We've been on for so long. We've continued to stay on. I've had members that have gone back and forth. So yes, ask once, you're not on waiver yet. But once you are, ask for that paperwork.
So once we're on the waiver. So none of this really applies for me yet because my son is not.
Correct. CCO won't be until, but you'll be ready for it then. Yeah.
I was told that if you're close to getting on the waiver,
Yeah.
it takes like 6 weeks to process the paperwork again. So you know,
Yes.
How do I know I'm close? I haven't had any contact in
Will you stay and talk to me afterwards?
Yeah.
I'm going to show you how to access the waiting list, and they'll show the month and the date that, the month and the date that they are on of the application. So if you know the month that you applied, the month and the year, then I'll show you kind of where, it's kind of but it'll give her a little more approximation than just, I applied during, 2020. Yeah, I mean, we'll at least get a little closer. But I'll show you where you can keep watching that.
so we have private insurance that's pretty good.
Yep.
I'm applying for a waiver. A child serve told me, a social worker there told me, we have private insurance. When I asked for like financial resources for paying for our out-of-pocket max every years and years in a row, so they have private insurance. I was just shocked that how do I get a case manager, but I don't know if I even want one?
You have, once your child qualifies for a waiver, you have to have a case manager.
So still do waiver for once it's on the waiver.
Well, I guess you're true. Thank you for switching my thing. So, see, qualifies and actually has a slot are two different things. You could be accepted on the waiver, like you meet the qualifications for the waiver, you'll receive an initial letter, but then you may not get an actual slot in the system to be able to have dollars in your child's name for 2.5, 3 years.
That's the waiting list.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. See, I was so lucky when I don't know if any of them, I don't think any of them had a waiting list back 13 years ago. That, it might have been just a couple months. I feel like there just wasn't. So their case manager is always that initial point of contact. They should be giving you these options. They're trained on this. Unfortunately, I mean, they're human too. A lot of them are brand new into it, no background in the field. So they rely on their coworkers to kind of help them out as well. Just like we rely on the people that we meet, our friends that have another child with a disability to kind of help guide us as well. So they're always going to be your first contact. They need to be able to refer you to the Cco program. From there, you guys have all probably heard of Viridian Credit Union, okay? So this is a part of Viridian Credit Union. It's not the credit union itself, but Viridian Fiscal Solutions. They are based out of Waterloo. They are considered the financial management service for the Cco program. They do all the paperwork and the paying of the employees. So an example would be the MCOs have the dollars in your child's name. The dollars have been told to go here, here, and here. They put those dollars to Viridian. Viridian then pays your employees as they submit their hours, okay? So Viridian helps with the paperwork to hire the employees, the member packet pays the employees, does the tax paperwork, all of that, the financial management portion. So that's pretty easy. Of course, they get paid a part for that. They don't do it for free, but we'll get into that in a little bit. The independent support broker is a third person of your key player. The case manager, it would be a conflict if your case manager also did your budget. So the independent support broker is your person that has been trained on how to do your member-specific budget. Just like you would do a budget for your own finances, it's similar. The budget will go in a little bit, there'll be a breakdown I'll kind of show you of how a budget works out. But that would be what my job is with my members. It is a self-employment job. There, sadly, is not like a requirement besides a little bit of training that we have to do and a background check and all of that. You don't have to have a background in the field. So anybody off the street could do this and then all of a sudden put their name on the ISB list and people could be calling and getting them on. I say sadly because that's where we're running into some problems, is that some people's budgets I don't feel like are being done correctly because people that don't have a background, they feel like this is, especially during the pandemic, we had quite a few signed on because it's a work from home job. Like I'm gonna make this easy money working from home. And then we ran into a big crash of problems and a lot of case managers were having issues and families were upset. And so you will kind of talk about how you would choose your independent support broker or my recommendations on how to choose an independent support broker. But their job would be helping you create that budget. They'll advise you on wages. If a good independent support broker would know the competing wages in the area that you live or know how to access them. They would know like the different paperwork that needs to be completed in a timeline. They would have a good rapport with Viridian and with the case managers. So obviously I may say that some case managers aren't probably on top of it, but I have to say there are some that are absolutely amazing that I work with. And I would love to say, if you get onto Iowa Total Care and I know you live in this area, ask for this person because they're amazing. I can't guarantee you to get them, but they are. So, I mean, that's where my job kind of lies, is to help you. An ISB is an employee of the member. We aren't employed by the Viridian, we're not employed by the case manager, we're an employee and advocate for the member. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit harder to see, but this can be actually accessed on the Viridian website. It was actually created by Viridian, and it's kind of a flow chart that shows the process of starting CCO. So we've already talked about how, well, you already have to have a waiver slot. Then you'll be assigned a case manager. You'll have a meeting with them to start the process, find out what services you'll qualify for, your child will qualify for. Okay? Your case manager will then say, okay, I have this member. It's through the computer. I don't know what they do through their computer, but it's something. They notify Viridian, and then Viridian sends you what's called a member packet. And I'm not going to say it's super thick, but it's not only a couple pages. It's probably about 12 to 15 forms. Quite a few of them have to do with like tax information, and that's because as your own employer, in your child's name, or if it's an adult, you are considered your own employer, which means there are you're responsible for taxes to pay your employee. Now, that's not personal taxes. We'll talk about that later too. That is the Medicaid dollar taxes. So you're giving permission through some of these forms to give Viridian permission on your behalf to file these tax forms, to speak with the IRS if is needed, to take employee taxes out of your employees' checks, those type of things. Very basic. I mean, there's Iowa Workforce Development in there too, because they have an unemployment insurance policy on your employees as well. Your ISB, good ISBs, will know all of those forms and can explain and summarize those in a couple sentences to you. So that is another point. If your ISB that you're speaking to can't summarize those forms, I'd be questioning if they really know what they're doing. After you fill out the member packet and you've chosen an independent support broker, that gets sent back to Viridian and is processed. From there, you'll start talking about your budget and choosing your employees. Employee packets are then requested and sent to you to hand out to employees. Just like any other job, they have to fill out like the I-9 form, copy of their IDs, because taxes will be taken out, direct deposit form, I mean, all that basic information that you would need as an employee, because it's a job, just like any other. A background check will need to be done, even though you may know that they're okay, it still has to be done legally. If they're concerned that there's something that's going to come back on that, I can tell you from experience, I have a lot that have come back with something. That OWI from 15 years ago might show up, but trust me, they might send you a paper after to explain the OWI, you send it back, then they'll hire you. Those things come up, not a big deal. The biggest thing is they're going to check is if you have an independent adult abuse or child abuse charge. If that person does, they're not going to be able to be hired. So, I mean, even though you may trust them, because say that charge was a long time ago and you just feel like you trust them, unfortunately, this is still a caregiver situation. So employee packets are being filled out. ISB can help with that as well. Sent back to be processed to Viridian and have their background checks run. You're working on the budget with the case manager, or getting with the ISB from the information the case manager has given you guys based on the services that the member qualifies for. In a little bit, we'll kind of talk about some of those services, but I don't want to go too far into depth because they're so individual based. What services my son qualifies for on the ID waiver is going to be different than what the health and disability waiver. Like, we could go on and on. How many hours my son qualifies for is going to be completely different than how many hours a 4-year-old is going to qualify for. So I don't go too much in depth with that because it's so individualized, but that's how the budgets are created. Once employees are approved, the budget's sent through and approved, you start. They can start. So On average, if we work really, really, really fast and there's an urgent matter, I can get someone set up within 30 days easily, as long as they respond fast to the paperwork. Most people, it's like a 45 to 60 day. Budgets can only start the first of the month. So like right now, if I got a referral this week, I'd say we're probably looking at July 1st. Okay. I'm not going to go over each individual of these since you guys have the packet, but the main member / employer / guardian responsibilities, paperwork. We all hate paperwork. We've done it all. We do it every year for them. But I can guarantee, I'll tell you, the biggest part is just that first bit. After that, it is smooth sailing, especially if you have a good ISB that teaches you from the beginning how to use the online timesheet system. Then you don't have to do paper timesheets, but just get the paperwork in, respond to emails timely from Viridian, and it's not that big of a deal. Access to a printer is a huge plus. You don't have to have personal meetings with your ISB. I rarely meet with mine. Usually a lot of ours are just emails back and forth, texts. I have a few that I do snail mail still. I have some elderly waiver clients that just can't access the library printer, and that's fine. Some ISBs will say, I don't do that. Some will. It just depends. Some will only work with Iowa Total Care case managers. I'm not sure why. Some will only work with AmeriGroup. Some will only work with fee-for-service. I'm not sure why some ISBs choose that, but to each their own. Again, member, employer. Well, you're the employer. You're going to hire. You'll have to fire. Rarely does that happen because it's your friends and family. Typically, it's because, hey, my college student moved away. I'm just going to keep her on when she comes home on breaks or something. Train. So when I say train, it's pretty basic. Respite, there really isn't much for training with respite. I mean, if your child has unique medical needs, they're going to know. I mean, you're going to tell them about it. But you don't have to train on like goals. SCLs, if anybody knows what that means, supported community living. Those are specific goals that they're working on in the home or the community. You'll just have to, I mean, your case manager should give you a printout of those goals that you guys have talked about. You could just make a printout of that and hand it over, highlight the main areas, and tell them that this is what you need to be working on when you're working on those SEL things. And on their online timesheet, there's a blank spot where they can say, money goal. Took 3 prompts to pay the correct amount at Fairway. It's very basic. There is not a lot that goes into it. So when I say hire, train, and fire, it's not near as much as what it would be if you were like head of an agency. Of course, work with the ISB. You'll create your own schedule. Stay within the hours and dollars, which isn't really that hard. I mean, we talk about that with the ISB. Of course, always ask questions. Independent support program. We'll always communicate with you. My personal philosophy is, even if I'm subbing at school during the day, my members typically know that I try to, even if I just respond on a text and say, I'm working, talk to you in a bit, within 4 hours is my goal of every email or text that I get. Some days that's very hard, but I figure 4 hours because I know I have a lunch break. So that's just how my philosophy is. You'll just have to talk when you're interviewing ISBs or asking. You can just ask them, what's your philosophy when I need to get a hold of you? Do you prefer email, phone? How soon will you get back to me? And that you'll have to decide for yourself what's best for you. Let's see, we talked about the budget. We are required by our contract to communicate with you quarterly. That communication could be as simple as, I'm going to email you and just make sure everything's going okay. Or I'll say, hey, I looked at your monthly statements. Looks like all your staff are being paid okay. Any problems going on? Or I noticed you haven't used any hours for 2 months. Do you need to hire another staff, or is there something going on? Do you need help? It could be as simple as that as my communication with you. It doesn't have to be extensive. They don't have to call and bother you. You guys have enough going on with a child with a disability. You don't need them in your face. And there's some ISBs that think that they have to see the child in person like the case manager does quarterly. That is not true. So that's up to you though. If you like that, go for it. Me personally, I have enough on my plate. I don't need my ISB to think that they have to come visit my house and have one more appointment I have to make. Of course, follow the policies of Medicaid and the Iowa Code. An ISB should know all of those or know how to access all of that. Employee. So these are the people that you are hiring. Of course, they'll fill out the employee packet with help from you and the ISB. Follow the plan, which you will have access to give them, create the schedule, submit hours online, stay within the hours. I'm sure you'll tell them you'll be making a schedule anyway, so keep track of that however you choose. Submit their documentation, which we talked about online. There's like a little area that they can write in a blurb. Occasionally, they may be asked to communicate with the ISB or guardian. That really just depends. I have a few employees that do have my number and my email that are very, very active with their members. They're mostly the adult members. And sometimes it's easier for them just to text me instead of going through the guardian or having the adult member. So it's kind of just been all worked out and it happens naturally. So some employees want to attend like the annual meeting when they're discussing goals for SEL. Mine does for my son. We actually have our meeting on Wednesday and she's gonna come after school and I just get her input because I feel like she's the one doing the majority of the work with him for the cooking and all that. What does she think he's ready for next? Let's see. Okay, so I kind of compiled a list of the questions I get frequently. So we'll see if I can answer any before we ask if there's questions. And of course that red is like not showing up at all. How much can I pay my employees? Well, I can tell you $50 is not happening per hour. Every member's budget's unique. We talked about that. Depends on the service, depends on the number of hours. But I can tell you, majority of time, it is definitely more than a traditional agency. I'm not sure if any of you guys have experience with traditional agencies in your area right now. But in my area, they're advertising at about like the $13 to $14 range per hour. I can tell you for my son, we pay his respite employees $16.50 per hour, and his SEL staff make $18.75 an hour. So he does get a lot of SEL hours, which bumps up that hourly rate, but that's what we're able to do. So that gives you a little bit of ballpark. Like I said, that just depends. If you only have respite, that number will vary. How many employees can I hire and how old? You can have as many employees as you want. I have one parent that we probably change her budget every 2 months because she hires a new employee. Before summer, we're always adding like 2 or 3. I just did it the other day, adding a couple more that we're hiring this month. She probably has 16 or 17 currently active employees. He is an adult. He receives respite, SEL, he lives at home, respite, SEL, and supported employment services all through Cco. So quite a few hours. She has specific staff that are the main SEL, the main supported employment, the main respite, but they all are backups for each other. So you can have as many as you want. For respite, they must be at least 16. It's very, very, very common for them to hire cousins and siblings that are 16 years old. That seems to be some of the first respite staff because they know their sibling the best. For SEL, 18 and above. Okay, Viridian and the ISB, how do they get paid for their services? So later we kind of talk about this. We don't work for free. The ISB is paid on an hourly rate, and Viridian gets a flat monthly rate. So when your case manager gives a monthly dollar amount for the Medicaid dollars for their services, that is put onto the budget, and right away, Viridian's amount will come out of that. And then the ISB is going to estimate how much they feel they will need on a monthly basis, how many hours. There is a cap amount that ISBs can do. So you can't have an ISB that's gonna be like, your budget's gonna take me 5 hours a month every single month. If anybody takes 5 hours a month every month, an ISB, there is a big problem. So there is a cap amount the state has put on in the Iowa code. So, but that's how they get paid. The rest of that afterwards is how we figure out your employee wages. Anybody heard of the Delegated Budget Authority terminology before? DBA, Budget Authority? Okay. This is if you have, say, can I use yours as an example? Can I use him? Sure. So say when you turn 18, okay? Do you plan to be your own guardian when you turn 18? Or you're gonna have someone apply for guardianship for you? Okay, let's say you did plan to be your own guardian, okay? But you did not want to sign all this paperwork that I'm talking about, because do you really want to sign your name to all these forms? No, I can answer that for you. You could say, hey, I want her to be my delegated budget authority. I'm giving her permission to sign this paperwork for me. She's also going to help me decide how to pay my employees. She's going to sign the budget. She's going to sign the timesheets. That's what a delegated budget authority is. Pretty simple. Sometimes we run into where they just haven't gotten the guardianship figured out yet and they just turned 18, and then we have to fill out that form, and it's just for a little while.
We're hoping that doesn't.
Yeah, I hope not.
We lost that we're in Iowa.
I know.
And start guardianship.
6 months before. I was gonna say 6 months before. So, non-traditional services. This is, so maybe I need to switch. Okay. If you know anybody that is currently on CCO, they might bring up that they can get their swim lessons paid for. I don't know if you've heard that yet. Swimming lessons could be a form of respite because you're getting a break. So you could use part of your respite dollars to get reimbursed for those swimming lessons. Now, I can't guarantee that that example is going to apply to everybody, but that seems to be a common thing, especially with my budgets coming up with summer. So that's why swim lessons was on the top of my head. Horseback riding lessons is another. There's a lot of therapeutic horseback riding with a lot of the Iowa law, especially with MCOs. Don't refer to it as horseback therapy because supposedly it's not an approved therapeutic thing. We just need to refer to it as horseback lessons. There's a terminology thing. It might get denied if we refer to it as therapy because they'll say, well, it should be run through insurance first. So there are ways that might be a possibility. A good ISB should know about that, as well as a case manager. So you can work through that together. That all needs to be prior approved and in the plan before the ISB can add it to the budget, though. Taxes. It doesn't affect your members or your personal taxes at all. That is one of the main questions I get immediately. Do you need to file anything in February or March? Nope. Viridian files all of that for you as the employer. It affects nothing of your own employment taxes, your own individual. Your employees themselves will get their own W-2s just like any other job. If they make, I think it's under $500 or $300, they may not get a W-2, but they can call and request that from Viridian then. Choosing an ISB. On the Viridian Fiscal Solutions website, there is a list of ISBs by county in Iowa. They're just listed as their name, email address, phone number, and then are they taking new clients or not. It's on Viridian Fiscal Solutions, sorry. I wonder if I put it somewhere in here. I can always pull it up here in a bit too. This list should be pretty accurate. There's also a list through DHS that is not as accurate. So I would go through the Viridian website for that list. But to be honest, I personally feel like the best way to find someone that will work well with your family and your case manager is to get personal referrals. Whether you have a friend or family member that already is using an ISB, or someone through the school, like your special education teacher might already know someone, or through your case manager. They might already have developed a good relationship with an ISB. Some case managers will tell you, well, I can't tell you to go through someone, but I can give you a few options. So that's, the best way. They will know who does their job correctly and who they have the most problems with. If they don't know, they can ask the Cco Specialists. Iowa Total Care and Iowa Total Care and AmeriGroup both have Cco Specialists. They're the ones that see all the budgets that come through, and they can tell you who they have to send and reject budgets about, or who they have the best, most of it's email interactions, but we all know you get a feel for people through that. So that's my personal recommendation. You can cold call people and ask them different questions and get to know them. But I think referrals, just like a lot of other things in life. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is breaking down the CCO budget, because we only have a few minutes. The member's budget is broken into multiple sections, like I talked about at the beginning. We'll have the information with that total budget amount. And then the service is divided into categories. So that could be respite, SCL. I decided not to include a copy of the budget because honestly it's a little overwhelming looking at it. It was when I first started, so I don't really want to throw any more information. I've already thrown so many acronyms and much information at you. If you would want it, you could always leave your address with me and I could send you a blank one and you could look at it. Goods and other services, which is where that category would be the non-standard items. There is a savings option. That option is typically utilized for what's called respite savings. Some might have heard. Instead of having a monthly respite deposit or monthly respite amount that you would use, you'd have a monthly respite deposit into a respite savings that you can accumulate throughout the year. We do this for my son's option because we use more respite in the summer than we do during the school year. So we accumulate respite January, February, March, April, May. Then we use a lot in June, July, August. So what we don't use in those few months accumulates to use in the summer. And then it restarts. It goes back to zero at the end of his plan year. So that's another thing your ISB should know. And that should be offered to you. When they're giving you wage options and all of that, they should say, hey, do you want the monthly respite or respite savings options? There's really no drawback to the respite savings. All my members that have respite go on respite savings in I give them the option, but every single one of them, after I've talked to them about it, go on the respite savings.
If you don't qualify for it, you're not using that in the other one, like we've got right now with the MCO,
The money goes,
decide whoever the provider is, whatever.
what you don't lose goes back to them.
Make sure that they're doing it on a yearly basis rather than monthly.
Yeah, yep. If you can do that, yep. SCL is a use it or lose it service. So what you don't use in that month goes back to the MCO. And MCOs are for profit, so.
But they will do the other for the investment.
The next is just kind of some little basic
Unit said it goes to the end of your son's
plan year.
Is that always like January, December? Does it change?
It
depending upon-
depends on when they received their waiver slot and started their services. So if you had your meeting, say you had your meeting here in May, your services might not start till July. So July to June would probably be the waiver year.
If you're wanting to utilize summer stuff in
Okay, so if you have a really good ISB, there's another option. I don't really want to go too far into it, but there's what's called a respite dump. Okay. Okay. Yep. There's 3 options when it comes to respite. Some ISBs don't know about that though, because they just choose not to learn, but because it is a little bit of work, but it's all right. So the next is just kind of breaks down, you know, you're going to hear your case manager talk about units versus hours. Has anybody heard that? Units are in 15-minute increments. I hate that. We talk in hours on the budget. So if they say, oh, you get 100 units of SEL, it's not 100 hours. I don't know how many parents come to me and they're like, oh, we get 100 hours of SEL. I'm like, no, actually you only get 25 hours because it was 100 units. So I just like to kind of throw that out there.
Respite for those children under 18 can only be used when the parent is not working.
Yes. That.
SEL is different, but respite.
Yes. There was an exception during the pandemic, but that will be changing here whenever that all ends. But yes, respite, one parent cannot be working because it's not a babysitting service. Or
Respite, is there an option for your respite workers for mileage?
there is not.
How do most families handle that? Because now with gas prices going up, they live out in the country.
Yep.
So you're looking at a 15-minute car drive to take them to the park. You just have to kind of say on the side, hey, I'll give you some gas.
That's what I do with mine. Celia, she's one of our high school students that she is my son's respite provider, and I'm like, okay, what are you guys gonna do today? And depending on what they're gonna do, I'm like, okay, here's $20. Or half the time she won't take money because that's just her. But that's also why I tend to pay the max amount for my staff instead of leaving some in my budget, because it helps make up for that gas money. Yep. Transportation, there is options for transportation and other services though.
SEL.
Yeah, and for day hab and stuff, yes. So, okay, I'm kind of gonna summarize it up here. The last couple things, I just included some quotes from my families. Like I said, they're amazing. I have the best caseload ever. There's no way I could have as many as I do and be willing to keep taking them. I actually just accepted 3 this week and 2 last week, so I don't know how to say no, but I also am the philosophy if I don't say yes, who are they gonna get? Because I chose someone for my son a year ago when we switched ISBs that I thought was gonna be great. I had gotten to know her through emails, through our ISB Facebook page, all of that, and she didn't even turn in his budget. And I do his own budget. I do everything. All she had to do is double check my numbers and sign it and submit it. And I found out 2 months later when my staff didn't get paid, she never even submitted it. So I'm like, what? You did that to another ISB. And you didn't even have to do anything but sign and email it. So I just caution you, please be careful. I mean, they're not all, there's some wonderful ISBs out there. They really are. Just talk to them, get referrals, talk to your case managers. If you're interested in it, we need good ones. I would gladly mentor you. So if you're interested in, let me know that too, or if you want my information. But yep, here's some feedback, some employee feedback as well of how they compare to other agencies. So, okay. I can stay to answer questions too if there's anything. I know there's a lot of information.
That was the quick and dirty. I almost had 2 people presenting. I'm glad we didn't
Oh
do
my,
that
well,
because-
when we found, I made it longer after I found out it was only me.
Okay.
I had it smaller.
Lots of questions, and we knew would have lots of questions.
Yes, it's a lot of information.
I'm going to ask that you leave your evaluations on the table for us. And if you are interested in the wrap-up, hopefully you are, and the prizes and the raffle, that's upstairs. We are going to start right on time in
Yep.
9 minutes. Yep. So we're going to let you go. But I promise you, we will bring Melissa back in future years. We'll have her at other events for Ask, because I can tell that this is a topic that folks really want to know more about.
Okay.
So, thanks for being here today.
Is there internet through here?
Is there what?
Is there internet, like?
Yes, there is.